There we go. Back to Guru Vachaka Kovai. So yesterday I think we did 570. As long as one thinks that one is a separate being. That's right. Okay. I think that's right. All right. So let's go here then. We'll move up to verse 615. And then we'll go to 616 if it happens that way. But we'll start with 615. So I'll read the whole thing and then we'll go through it. Besides the self, nothing in truth exists. But then the deep delusion that the body is oneself makes one let go the solid, non-dual bliss of immortality and fall into birth and death. And then in brackets it says, the false identification with the body makes one think that one is born and one will die. The false identification with the body will make one think that one is born and one will die. So, obviously the body is what is born and dies. The body, the brain, the mental system, the senses. Yes, what is born with that is the world, because the brain gives the meaning to the world. The senses open up to the world. What dies with that is the world. Okay. So, speaking in Nisargadatta, he used to say, when you identify with the body and the mind, you fragment yourself. He said that in one of the annotational book things that I read. When you identify with the body and the mind, you fragment yourself. Fragment meaning like you break into pieces. So you break the self, which is the big S self, of course, as him and Ramana would say. As soon as you identify with the brain and the body, you fragment that sense of wholeness. So that wholeness then becomes a bunch of separate parts, meaning this body there, that world there, for instance. So when you identify with the I thought and the body, then you fragment the experience of the wholeness. The wholeness being your quote-unquote, let's say natural state, for lack of a better, not quote-unquote, but wholeness being your natural state. Not a state, but your natural position before the body and the mind are identified with. Before that wholeness is then fragmented. So this says, beside the self, the big S self, Ramana, that's like what you are in the language of Ramana's school, big S self, nothing in truth exists. So existence, the body-brain world, body-mind, small m-mind world, only exists because of the space in which it arises. Meaning it is not self-existing. So J as a body is not self-existing, nor is the mental system self-existing. It is conditioned by what it's come in contact with. So the brain, the J thinks that J is self-existent, meaning separate from everything else. That's the position that the thought J or me puts the body in. It puts the body here separate from all other bodies. And then this is saying, beside the self, nothing in truth exists. So J thinks that he is separate from everything else, meaning he is self-existent. And the thoughts present as if they're all original ideas, which they're not original ideas, because they're all conditioned. Like, I saw this thing yesterday from this lady who was speaking out about abuse, yeah? Now, I was abused when I was a child, so when my head is seeing the world, it is seeing through the lens of everything is my fault. It is seeing that way because of what happened when I was young. I can see that, but also you can feel that response in the body. That is the perfect example of conditioning to me. Now, I thought that when my head saw that everything was my fault, that everything was actually my fault. I wasn't seeing that the brain is conditioned, that view is conditioned by specifically what happened when I was a young kid. So that is a perfect example of the conditioning. Now that brain, which is saying everything is my fault, is taking itself to be an independent thing, existent, separate from everything else. It's not seeing that it sees that way because of what the body came in contact with. So the body, the brain move through life, they come in contact with things, they get programmed essentially to see a certain way. That's the way this head sees. It sees everything as my fault. Yeah? If you can see that that's conditioned, that it's not self-existent, meaning that those thought patterns and those ideas have been created through contact with something else. You don't blame the something else, but you see that the mental movement is conditioned. In so doing, seeing that, you can lose faith in that mental movement because it's always presenting the conditioning. It's not presenting what's actually happening. Meaning most times things are not my fault. Yeah? But the brain doesn't see it that way. And I tried to change that and it didn't work. But the brain is taking itself to be existent, separate from everything else, which is completely bogus. It only sees the way that it sees because of what it's come in contact with. The same way when I was abused when I was a kid, now my head sees from that lens. It still sees. There will be an event that happens in the life, and then that will trigger the response of the mental system, and bang, there you go. And when that mental system goes, what gets placed before it is that it's my mental system, and then it's taken independent, to be independent. And in so doing, I'm bound to its view, even though it's viewing completely off. Okay? So, besides the self, nothing in truth exists. The other way to look at that is through like the lens of impermanence. Or emptiness, let's say. Emptiness of a separate self, as they might say in Buddhism. So the me who is presenting as self-existent, the you who is presenting as self-existent, is presenting as a self-existent thing, meaning that there's something in here which is separate from everything else. When that's investigated, it's false. So the body is empty of a separate self, but it doesn't agree. But it is empty of a separate self. So that goes for everything. When you see a table across the room from you, that table, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, is made of non-table parts. There's tons of atoms and different pieces and different things that come together. Then the senses see it and the brain goes table. But it's not actually a table. You see? It's just a zillion, gabillion different things coming together to form shape of a table. But the table is not self-existent. It's completely dependent on everything else. The thing is, you and me, we don't think so because of the self-centeredness of the mental system. The self-centeredness has us in the position of self-existent, separate from. And in so doing, everything is very personal. Everything becomes very personal. So, besides the self, nothing in truth exists. Nothing else has self-existence. Everything in everything that's happening only exists because of the space in which it arises in. So the room you're sitting in right now, everything in that room only exists because of the space of the room. Without the space of the room, the things wouldn't be able to arise, let's say. Yeah. So what is existing? The things in the room? What is self-existent? The things in the room or the space in which they arise? It's like the clouds in the sky in many ways. Yeah. What is existent? The clouds come and go, but the space of the sky does not go anywhere. So the sky is not dependent on the clouds. The clouds are completely dependent on the sky. So you and I are completely dependent on the big S self, which is not separate big S selves or awareness, let's say, or open listening. It's not like I have a big S self and you have a big S self. It's one field called self, called a big S self. I don't use the word self because in recovery they use self as to talk about the individual. But Ramana and them use self as a big S, meaning like the absolute. So the body and the brain only exist because of the space in which they happen. In which they only exist because of the awareness of them, let's say. And it's not separate awarenesses. Your awareness is not separate from my awareness. Your big S self is not separate from mine. It's one field of self. Yeah, that's why it's called wholeness. It's the brain that separates those into separate selves. All right. So beside the self, nothing in truth exists. But then the deep delusion that the body is oneself makes one let go the solid non-dual bliss of immortality and fall into birth and death. The deep delusion that the body is oneself. So when the head says me, it is looking at body, essentially. Now this is considered the deep delusion that what I am, is that me thought, therefore what I am is the body. And now those are selling the product of completely independent from everything else. So as soon as you identify with the deep delusion that you are the body, you let go, let's say, for the language of the text here, the solid non-dual bliss of immortality, and you fall into birth and death. So as soon as you identify with the body and the mind as being what you are, you've left what you are, which is the solid non-dual bliss of immortality, because the space of the sky is not born and dies. The space of the sky does not come and go. It's the clouds that come and go in the sky. Yeah? You are not a cloud. What you are is not a cloud. Jay and Varsha and Noni are clouds. Those are clouds that come and go. What you are is the sky. But as soon as you identify with the cloudness, you stop living in the skyness, because now you're identified with the individual, and now you fall into the cycle of birth and death, which does happen to the body, birth and death, obviously. But also every thought is considered a birth, and every thought will be born and it will die. Now the me thought, the first thought, let's say, the thought I also is born and dies many, many times a day. But it doesn't present that way. It presents as a permanent thing attached to the body, independent from world. So essentially, nothing is self-existent except what we are, big S self. Not everything else is completely interdependent. The thoughts, the ideas, the body are completely one impermanent but interdependent on everything else. Yeah? But then the deep delusion that the body is oneself. So as soon as the body is identified with, you've left, seemingly, you've left being the sky, and now you're walking around as a cloud. And then the cloud wants to get out of itself. And then the part in brackets says, the false identification with the body makes one think that one is born and one will die, which is the ultimate fear. If you are what is born, then you are what is going to die. But if you are not what was born, then you cannot die. Then you cannot die. It's the body and the brain which are born, and you are the unborn, as Basui or whatever his name, the Zen guy would say. Beautiful. The next verse says, samsara is nothing but our thought. Samsara. Let's look up the definition because I don't remember the. Samsara. Samsara. Right. So the cycle of life and death. There we go, Varsha. Thank you. Samsara is nothing but our thought. So the cycle of birth and death is nothing but the noggin, essentially. What's born is the me idea, and what will die is the me idea. What will die with the me idea is body and world, because body and world only get existence from the idea of me. So samsara is nothing but our thought. Yeah? The life and death of each thought, when it pops out of quote-unquote source or whatever, I don't know why I keep saying quote-unquote. When it pops out of source, the thought is born, and then that thought will die. That happens, whatever, a zillion times a day or however much, yeah? But samsara is nothing but that. The cycle of birth and death is nothing but an idea, which is very interesting in many ways because spirituality itself is nothing but an idea. This is all ideas. The sky does not need these ideas. The sky does not go to satsang or meditate or do any of this stuff. The sky does not take psychedelics. The sky is not trying to get out of itself, and it's not trying to get into anything else. Open listening is just there. It's open listening, yeah. This is all ideas from the mental. Spirituality itself, spiritual practice, is all ideas from the mental. So when it says samsara is nothing but our thought, everything is really nothing but our thought. Which can be extremely liberating and beautiful, or it can be super dreadful, depending how it's looked at, I suppose. But the cycle of life and death, as Varsha says there, samsara, that being nothing but our thought to me is extremely liberating. Because you're not the brain. So what's presenting all these ideas of life and death, bondage, liberation, suffering, spiritual and not spiritual, that's what you're not. You don't start there. So you can be free from that, which is great news if you're in addiction recovery. Because being free as that hasn't worked. I haven't gotten peace as samsara, the thought system, or as J. J gets peace when you see you're not J. Then you stop listening to the head push the body super hard to get somewhere or get out of another place. That's the killer. Trying to get out of something, yeah? You're trying to get out of a mental idea most of the time. Like I was always trying to get away from depression, but depression was based on the idea that I'm worthless and everything is my fault. I'm only listening and taking those ideas seriously because I think they're mine and I think that they're independent. But if they're not mine and they're not independent, then those ideas get put into question. They don't just get followed. Yeah? So all of samsara, the cycle of life and death, which would be the cycle of suffering itself, all of that is essentially in my noggin. That's all just ideas. Yeah? Let's call it mind, small m mind. And the whole message of this is you're not the body and the mind. So when the body and the mind sell you a product, when the mind tries to sell you that product, you say, well, if I'm not the body and the mind, then what's going on? It's selling you a conditioned old product, essentially. That's what I've noticed. So that's quite beautiful. Samsara is nothing but our thought. But the thought system. And you don't need to demonize the thought system. That's not what this is about. This is only about questioning who owns that thought system. Because the me who's presenting as a separate thing is not a separate thing, but it's presenting as the owner of that thought system. And you're before that me thought. So when it says, I'm doing this, you're not doing that. The sky's not doing anything. It's putting into question who owns those thoughts. So samsara is nothing but our thought. Those who live spontaneous and thought-free may seem to dwell in a body bound and moved by fate, but they're in freedom, roam in the boundless space of true awareness. So it says, those who live spontaneous and thought-free. This is quite important, I feel. When people read that, they think that they're going to stop all of the thoughts. That's what they think is going to happen. This is the goal. Yeah? I'm going to stop all of my thoughts. Now, the I who's saying that is one of the thoughts. And that I thought is not going to kill itself. It won't do it. So the idea of being thought-free is not a constant or permanent stopping of the mental system. It's a seeing and a knowing from before the me that you're not the me who the thoughts arise to. So that when the thoughts pop, you don't go with them. That would be considered being thought-free, meaning you're not grasping on to the mental system when they go. You can grasp onto it if you want to, but there's no need, because you know from before that, what you are knows from before that those thoughts are arising to a me that you're not. So the idea of being thought-free is not that the brain is dead. It's not that I've killed the ego. No. You've killed the identification with the ego, but you haven't even killed it. It's just been uprooted because it's the truth. You're not the sense of me. The sense of individuality is not your nature. That's not where you begin. So that essentially just gets proven, but it's true fact now. Yes? So when that gets proven, you stop chasing the thoughts. That would be thought-free. It's not that you're never going to think thoughts or there's never going to be thought content. That would mean that you're dead. Yeah? And when I talk to some people, I have to say, I spent many years wanting to end my own life in alcoholism. And when I hear people talk about, I'm going to stop all my thoughts, it shines very brightly as the same attitude that I used to have when I drank, which is, I want this life to end. That's what it shines as to me. Because the brain, if that depressive movement is part of the mental system, it's going to grab this message and try to use this message as that. Yeah. Interesting. So to be thought-free is to see that the one who owns the thoughts is not a separate permanent one. And then whatever the thoughts present, they don't get grasped onto. They're not grabbed. Yeah? And in so that, what you are is thought-free. Meaning it doesn't matter what the mental system is throwing through the pipe of the body, none of it's getting grasped. So what you are, the sky, or the space, or as he says here, the boundless space of true awareness, is untouched by thought, meaning that space is thought-free. Does that mean there are no thoughts? No, there's probably thoughts going through, but they're not getting grasped, meaning that what's not grasping them is completely thought-free. That would be the boundless space of true awareness. So there's a bunch of thought that's presenting birth and death. That would be samsara. Those who are thought-free have not stopped those thoughts, but they've seen that the one who owns those thoughts is not what they are. So they stop grasping the thoughts. Therefore, they live in the boundless space which is thought-free. And then thoughts go on, but they don't grasp onto them. Yeah? And in that way, you hear the thoughts clearly. You don't hear the thoughts from the viewpoint of my opinion about my thoughts. You hear them very clearly, without the distortion of self-centeredness. And this is why, when you sit back into the boundless space of awareness, you really get to know the individual, because you see it without the distortion of the brain, essentially. You see it very directly. And then it's almost like the more you let go of the individuality, the more individual you become. This is like the paradox of the whole thing. And you see that individuality. You really see and hear the conditioning of that individuality. The more you soften the grip on it. So those two verses, we'll read them through one more time. Beside the self, nothing in truth exists. But then the deep delusion that the body is oneself makes one let go the solid, non-dual bliss of immortality and fall into birth and death. Samsara is nothing but our thought. Those who live spontaneous and thought-free may seem to dwell in a body bound and moved by fate, but they in freedom roam in the boundless space of true awareness. So it says, those who live spontaneous and thought-free may seem to dwell in a body bound. So they seem to be bound by the body. But they in freedom roam in the boundless space of pure awareness. Ramana has another thing, this little pamphlet thing, where it says it's like the body like a radio. It's like the body is the radio, and if you open the radio, there's all kinds of stuff in the radio, but you can't find the voice that's talking in the radio. That's like the message in many ways. There's no J in here talking. There's no thing in here at the center of it. Yeah? When the body is walking, there's the sense of the individual walking, but what you are is the still space that the body walks through. Yeah. All right. If there's any questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat thing there. Okay.